of 3 of our discussion of science versus evolution. Now, we've already discussed how Christianity as a religion makes sense, how it is the true and only religion that has any truth in it. But now we're looking at the other side that is the most popular religion today in a secular world. That is evolution. We looked at last week, kind of introduced this whole theme, how evolution and science actually fight against each other. Science, by definition, takes observation and experiment. And you can't do that with evolution. Now, for granted, so we understand each other, we also talked about how religion, such as Christianity, is also not scientific because creation itself was not observed by us, nor can it be tested by us. But that's not the point. We're not claiming it to be science. People who claim evolution to be science is the one we're contesting today. Evolution and science go against each other because it takes some kind of belief, some kind of leap in your own mind to say that this happened. And they claim to have all this evidence for it. Now, we talked about last week, there are 6 types of definitions of evolution. Who remembers any of them? What are the 6 types of definitions we looked at? We said that 5 were stupid definitions. And 1 is a true definition of what we could actually say is scientific. Micro is the one true one. It's the one we actually can observe. I don't like calling it microevolution because it gives some kind of lenience to macroevolution when you say that, but the concept is very true. The concept is scientific. What are the other 5? Of course, macroevolution. Cosmic evolution, that's the beginning of the universe and time. Then there was chemical evolution. How did the elements in the periodic table evolve all the way from hydrogen? That had to have happened, according to their theory. Then there was planetary evolution. That's the origin of the stars, the planets, how they evolved. That's what they claim. And then there's organic evolution. And that's the beginning of life. Okay? And then the macro and the microevolution. Those are the 6 different types of evolution. The reason I brought that up is that anytime you're discussing evolution with someone, especially as a Christian trying to debunk evolution and talk about the truth of the Word of God, you have to know what you're talking about. You have to know which of the definitions you're talking about. Because usually what happens when somebody who is an evolutionist tries to give evidence for evolution, what they'll do is they'll give evidence for microevolution and claim that that supports macroevolution. What was the difference between micro and macroevolution? Who knows that? Who knows the difference between those two? Micro and macro. Micro means shorter, macro means longer, according to the Greek words. Micro, did you say macro or micro? Macro. Okay, micro is the smaller scale. It is within a species, within a kind of animal, the different variations you can get within that kind. That's why we have different breeds of dogs, or different breeds of cows, or different types of roses, or anything like that. That's microevolution. It's a change in a short amount of time. But what is macroevolution compared to that? Macroevolution. That's the change of whole taxonomic organizations, orders, in a vast amount of time. Okay? That's changing from family to order in a vast amount of time. Now, here's why those two do not work. To change whole taxonomic groups, information has to be added into the gene pool, into the DNA of the individual. Information has to be added for that to happen. Why does that not work? Why can't information just be added? It's because we have never observed any material being made from nothing. Anything material cannot be made from just thin air. Any kind of information, to go from an amphibian to a reptile and from a reptile to a bird, there has to be information added to that gene code. We have never observed that to happen, making it unscientific. To believe that happens, if you want to believe that, that's fine, but that's on you. But to believe that happens is to take a leap in the dark. You do not have science to back you up. You do not. Now, we already looked at this entire time how science points to creation. But this is really the other end of it. Science points away from evolution. Let's go back to the planetary and stellar evolution thing for a minute, okay? Who's ever heard of plutonium halos? Raise your hand if you ever heard of plutonium halos. I do not blame you. It's kind of a boring study. A plutonium halo is a ring that's caused by the decay of plutonium in rocks, okay? When plutonium in rocks decays, and it has a half-life of about a few seconds, it leaves a little ring around in the rock, okay? Evolutionists say that the Earth was a hot molten mass with lots of volcanoes, lots of lava, before it cooled down into our hard crust today. And then that's when the rain fell for millions of years, causing the seas where life began, okay? Because we find plutonium halos in our rock today, we can know that Earth was never a hot molten mass. Plutonium halos can only plutonium can only decay in rocks that are already solid. And by dating the plutonium halos, we can see that the Earth was never a molten mass. There would not be any plutonium halos in the rocks at all. They would all have melted away. So just by the fact that we can actually see these things points to the Earth already having been solid, which makes sense because our Bible says the Earth was made of water. There's water over the Earth, not a hot molten mass of lava. Okay, now to the origin of life. Did you know that there were scientists back in the 1950s who were trying to create life in the lab? Raise your hand if you ever heard of that. Scientists in the 1950s were trying to create life in the lab. They ran this experiment of what they thought would be the exact specifications of what the atmosphere and the world was like back when life supposedly began. And they ran it through an electrical charge, which would have been like lightning for them. And what they got at the end of it was they got a few amino acids. And if you don't know, amino acids are important in making up protein, and they're important for making life. Okay? They got a few amino acids. But they came a long way from getting life. There are several different elements and factors they added into this experiment, this controlled experiment. One of them was ammonia. We'll talk about that in a minute, though, okay? But one of them was not oxygen. One of the elements that they got rid of in this experiment was oxygen. Here's why that's important, okay? They had theorized that from cells becoming multicellular beings in that environment, oxygen could not have taken place. So that's why they didn't add oxygen to the experiment. If oxygen had been there, these cells would have oxidized. Then there would have been no life. You ever seen cut open a banana or cut open an apple and leave it out on the counter for a few hours? Even for a few hours, it starts to get brown. It's oxidizing. Oxygen is being added. If these cells had oxidized, then there would actually be no life occurring. So they left oxygen out of the experiment. They said oxygen could not have been there for life to evolve. Here's the issue. What they did add was ammonia, okay? Ammonia is destroyed by UV light. Who knows what UV light is? UV light? Ultraviolet light, okay? We have different types of light radiation coming from the sun. What we see and perceive is visible light, okay? How we see color is through visible light. Different types of wavelengths from different, rays of light hit different objects, and some objects absorb and some objects reflect. And what it reflects, the wavelength it reflects, is the color we see in that object. That's how we see color. All right, but the sun also gives off ultraviolet light. Now, ultraviolet light is hitting us right now. No wall can protect us from ultraviolet light, okay? Ultraviolet light, or UV light, destroys ammonia, okay? Now, they added ammonia to this experiment, saying ammonia would have been necessary for life to have evolved, okay? UV light destroys ammonia. What protects against UV light? Ozone. What's the ozone made of? Oxygen. Here's the problem. So they didn't add oxygen to the experiment because it would have oxidized. Okay? But without oxygen, the ammonia would have been destroyed because of UV light. So, life couldn't evolve without oxygen. Life couldn't evolve with oxygen. There's our problem. Life couldn't evolve without oxygen. Life couldn't evolve with oxygen. I have an answer to this. It didn't evolve. See, from their own experiment, what they actually produced was something that was 80-something% tar. Something that was already poisonous to any kind of life. They didn't come close to creating life in the lab. There are many other examples like this, and we'll talk about some more next week when we talk about some of the hoaxes of evolution that we read about in textbooks. But I'll talk about a few today. Who's ever been to a museum where you've seen a whale skeleton hanging up in the museum, okay? Some museums still have these certain bones I'm talking about in this whale skeleton, some do not. There are bones near the backside of the whale. They're two little tiny bones, about that big, not that long, okay? In textbooks, even still today, I've read some recently. They claim that these bones, they're about this big. You ever seen a whale? A whale's huge. Bones about this big, there's two of them on the backside, are what's left over of legs. Take that in for a minute. Left over of legs. Okay, so what they say is this creature evolved its way onto land and then eventually evolved its way back into the ocean. It apparently didn't like what was going on the land. What we have are these supposed legs, what's left over. They say these are vestigial structures. What is vestigial? What does that mean? Useless? Yeah, pretty much. Something that's not necessary for living is kind of what the idea is. And if you go by that definition, there's a lot of things we have that aren't necessary to live. That doesn't mean they aren't useful. So I personally believe there are no vestigial structures even within mankind. Even though we may live without certain things like an appendix, the appendix has its place. I'll talk about that later. Anyway, they say these bones in this whale are vestigial structures, leftover legs from when they had evolved. They teach this in textbooks. Kids learn this in science class. They're learning, unless you have a godly teacher who is actually standing up against this at the risk of their own job, they are actually learning these things as true. These are leftover whale legs. Except that was proven wrong decades ago. You know what those bones actually are? Those bones are actually for helping birth baby whales. Helping birth baby whales. They have nothing to do with walking. They had everything to do with getting more whales. They're support bones for birthing whales. That was proven decades ago. And yet it's still taught. I was at a museum when I was on my honeymoon with Emily in Boston. We were at the, I think it was the New England Aquarium, I think is what it was called. And they had a big whale skeleton hanging from the sky. And one of the signs on it actually read this thing, and I was like, this is an accredited aquarium in the museum part. This is an accredited place. And yet this thing that's been disproven for decades now is still being taught. It's things like that when we as Christians, if we don't care enough to find these obvious contradictions within this theory, we are doing a great fault to our young ones. We are. Something like this can easily be looked up, how it has been disproven. The same with the horse evolution. You ever seen the images of the horse evolving from this small four-toed creature over these thousands of years into what we know as a horse today? That was disproven almost 100 years ago. Yet in some textbooks, and sometimes it's not, it's not a lot more rare, but still in some textbooks it's being taught as true. In some museums it's being taught as true. And that was been disproven. Even evolutionists say we can't use that anymore. These things just take a simple look, simple research to do. Yet sometimes we as Christians don't care to do it. Maybe we don't know about it. I'll give you that. Maybe we don't know about these individual issues. Maybe we are unaware that these things are issues. But I think it's interesting. Every time we go to a zoo, or every time we go to an aquarium, or to a museum, or to a library, or we're sitting in class, whatever it may be, and the idea of evolution is brought up, in any sense that's not microevolution, there should be questions happening in our mind. There should be questions that we are asking others. There should be something we are to contest there. It should make us want to research further. Now, I'm not against research. Research is a vital thing. Research, learning, finding truth, seeking truth is a vital thing. And let me tell you this. If evolution were true, the evidence would back it up. It would be rational to believe in it. If evolution were true, and if that were true, for us to be rational, we would need to believe in it. So you have to do your own research. You have to do your own looking to find if you believe in it. But ever since I was a young teenager, I've been looking into this. And there have been times where I've wavered in my belief. Not my belief in God, but my belief in creation versus evolution. I do not waver anymore. I find new information all the time. I find new things people are saying every day about it. I have discussions all the time with people about this belief, and they bring up new evidence for it all the time. Except none of it, not one bit of it, stands up to scrutiny. Not one bit of it. At the very best, what they can get is this. It's just as rational and reasonable to believe a creator did this than evolution. That's the best they get. But most often they get, I'm sorry, science contradicts this. And then usually what happens with evolutionists at this point is they start arguing away from science. They don't use science anymore. They try not to use science anymore. They argue beliefs. They try to argue against God. But if you know what you're talking about, if you know how to defend the Word of God, and you know how to defend your faith in a way that's gentle and respectful, we can't forget that part of 1 Peter 3:15. You know the truth. You know what's true. We have seen this entire study how God's Word is what's true, and how any rational person must admit, after examining the evidence that it is God's Word, that is indeed true. We know the truth. Sometimes we're not willing to stand up for it. Sometimes we are willing to stand up for it, though. And just don't. We let others tear down in other people's minds what the truth is, and we do nothing to combat that. Friends and Christians, let me tell you today, Ephesians chapter 6, when it's talking about a spiritual warfare, this is part of it. This is very much a war for people's hearts and souls. And Christians are the only ones that actually possess the truth. Do you know that? Christians are the only ones that possess the truth. Why are we afraid to speak it? Why? Truth is more important than a relationship. Do you know that? Truth is more important than any earthly relationship that I could keep. If you're saying, I don't want to stand up for this because I like my friends here on earth, what do you think Christ would say to that? Truth is what you possess. I'm going to say that again, okay? Because I've taught this in my short 22 years of life. I've taught this many, many times with people. And Christians all the time, even I see Christians on social media back down against these kind of claims. We know the truth. What did Jesus say about the truth in John chapter 8? What did he say about it? The truth will do what? Set you free. The truth will set you free. What do you suppose he meant by that? Do you suppose he just meant one thing by that? Because he's not exactly specific at what he means by that. What do you think he means by that? Of course, that means being set free from sin. Okay, that's obvious. But could it be other things? The truth will set you free from fear. The truth will set you free from bad relationships. The truth will set you free from ignorance. The truth will set you free from all these kinds of things. Value truth. Value evidence. Now, here's what I want to tell you about this, though. About evolutionists who will try to make claims against Christianity. They will be numerous, because evolution as a religion, and it is a religion, is growing. It is growing each and every day. New followers all the time. And the reason there are new followers is because truth is not being preached. Truth is not being preached. I love each and every one of you here. I don't know how many of you are here. I'm not about to offer an invitation, by the way. I don't know how many of you are here that are actually Christians, okay? Actually New Testament Christians. I've been speaking to the New Testament Christians here for a minute, and I want to speak to you a little bit more about this, okay? I love each and every one of you, everybody here, especially those who are of like faith. But when I see an auditorium, not even full, but with the people that are here that are just Christians, don't get me wrong, I love that you're here, you need to be here. When you're just Christians here, though, I'm a little disheartened. I'm a little discouraged. Because we know the truth. Why aren't people who don't know the truth here? Of course, they have their own reasons. They might make up their own excuses. They might say no. They might reject you to your asking. That happens a lot. I know. That happened to me. That happened to you. That happens a lot. Okay? Does that mean we quit trying? Why is it only Christians? I'm not getting on to you. I'm just listen to me here. Why is it only Christians are always here? This is not a country club for saints. This is a hospital for sinners. Say that again. This is not a country club for saints. This is a hospital for sinners. We need people who don't know the truth to at least show up so they can hear it. If you're not willing to teach it, if you're not willing to do the research necessary to be able to defend your faith against false accusations such as macroevolution and the other 4 types of evolution we said were wrong, at least bring them here. If you have questions yourself, ask. Do your own research. Now, I'm not about to claim in my 22 years of life that I have every answer under the sun. That's not even remotely close to true. But I know it does. Everything you need to know. All things pertaining to life and godliness. That's what Peter says. If you don't know, ask. Do your own research. Find the truth. Search for what is true. Hold on to what is good. That's the sentiment Paul gives in 1 Thessalonians 5:21, one of my favorite verses. The reason that's one of my favorite verses is because it gives such license to questions. I don't know who's like me, but I am an inquirer. I have been my entire life. I ask questions to an annoying degree. I try not to. I'm better about it than I used to be. But I used to be question after question. I'm a question guy. Because I like finding things out. I like discovering things. I like answers. That's why 1 Thessalonians 5:21 is one of my favorite verses, because it gives license to questioning things. Hold fast to what you actually find is true, what is good, what is righteous. Hold fast to that. Hold on tight to that. Do you think you're holding on tightly if you never proclaim it? Do you think you're holding on tightly if you never do what's necessary to help others get to heaven, to find the truth? I'm telling you, I'm not over-exaggerating this, okay? Evolution is the fastest growing religion today. You know how many Christians there are in the world? I'm not talking about Christendom. In Christendom, there's 38,000 denominations. 38,000. How many Christians, New Testament Christians, there are in the world today? It's less than 500,000. Less than 500,000 Christians in the world today. There are almost 8 billion people in the world, and Christians are the only ones going to heaven. That's what Jesus said. He's the only way to heaven, only way to God. I'm going to be real with you. He's the only way. We're the only ones God's here praying. We're the only one God recognizes as saved. We're the only ones that know the truth and can possibly know the truth to its fullness. It bothers me that we do, and I'm talking to myself just as much now. Don't get me wrong, I'm talking to myself just as much. It bothers me when we let opportunities pass. As it should. It should bother us. Tangent done. Okay. Evolution. See how much time we have left. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It starts at home, doesn't it? It always starts at home. If we can't start our own faith where we're at, then how do we expect to start a faith somewhere else? I mean, that's the way it is. Evolution. Okay. Next week, we're talking about part 3 of this. Now, here's what I want to warn you about next week. We're going to go looking into textbooks themselves, okay? We're going to look at different hoaxes of evolution, different things people who are evolutionists have tried to persuade other people in believing that are absolutely false. At the very best, they're misunderstandings. At the very worst, they're downright lies, okay? And after that, on the 30th, I believe that's the right date, on the 30th, the entire study will be wrapped up in this discussion of why be an atheist or an evolutionist and the fruits of being both of those. All right. Thank you.